Welcome to this episode of 10 Conversations for 10 Years. I'm Amar, Chief Quality Officer at East London Foundation Trust, and delighted to be joined in this episode with Pedro Delgado, who's interviewing with me from the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. And we are focusing specifically in this session on the science of improvement, and delighted to have with us Pierre, Chief Scientific Officer at the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and Peter Margolis, who's the Director of the James Anderson Centre for Health Systems Excellence at Cincinnati Children's, which we all know is one of the world's leading organisations at applying improvement in daily operations. Pierre, Peter, thank you so much for joining us both.
Excited to be here, Amar.
Yeah, great pleasure.
Fantastic. Pedro, do you want to say a few words at the start of this, just to lay out the context about the science of improvement and what we want to try and explore in this conversation together?
Yeah, thanks, Amar and Peter and Pierre. So good to be with you again. What we're trying to do is look back to look forward, essentially. And part of that looking back and understanding a little bit about the science of improvement, if we can call it that, is so that we can look forward and try to build even stronger designs, to build stronger systems to deliver the care that we all want to deliver, which is the best care possible. And ELFT has been at this for at least 10 years, although there's been a lot of work historically in the trust to improve patient care. But what we're trying to do today is just to get underneath a little bit of the word science alongside improvement.
Thanks, Pedro. Pierre, I'd love to hear a little bit from you about why do we describe quality improvement as a science? We often hear it being described as improvement science or the science of improvement. Why do we use the word science?
When you ask that question, Amar, I kind of reflect on what really drew me to the science of improvement in the first place. My previous career was as a basic scientist and a clinician. When you think about what science actually is or sets out to do, it's based on being able to observe phenomena and then test through using a scientific method the validity of what you're observing. And what is really exciting for me about working in this field is that that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're really curious about, we're very ambitious about what we want to do in terms of setting an aim. We're very curious about the way in which the system that we're observing is working, and we're testing constantly ideas about how to improve them. And it's that cadence really that I think underlies the science of improvement. Suddenly there was the offer of this path where I was being invited to think about the way things were put together, the systems approach, observe what was going on, introduce ideas, and then most importantly of all, to actually not assume that those ideas would actually work, but actually have a deliberate way of going about testing them. So for me, that is, and maybe that's too kind of lowbrow for this conversation, but that's the way I think about it, and that's certainly what pulled me into this field.
Pierre, I think the reflection coming from your own personal experience and background is an important one to get us started. And I wonder, Peter, if you would add anything to what Pierre said, and also as you reflect on this question of science, if you have any suggestions for people listening to this conversation around how we take that science and then design quality improvement in a way that gives us the best possible chance to succeed in what we're trying to do.
I think Pierre said it very well. He proposed a definition of science, which I think aligns with a standard definition of science, which is the systematic study of the structure and the behavior of the world through observation and experimentation and testing theories against the evidence that we produce. And so if you use that definition of science, then quality improvement certainly is a great example of one set of methods for working science. One of the features of the work that we do is that we work in complex systems, and although we would like to think that there could be a silver bullet, that a single change that we could make in the environments in which we work that would have a transformative effect, that's almost never the case, and perhaps never the case. So one of the features of the work that we do in quality improvement is that we're always designing complex interventions aimed at producing health systems that result in better outcomes. And the challenge is that we're often working not only individual level, but also at the microsystem or organization, poses really significant challenges, both for the implementation of the interventions that we're working on, as well as the evaluation. So the first thing that I think we need to realize about the design of quality improvement that gives us the best chance of success, as you said, is that we are doing complex, that our interventions are complex, and that we're taking a complex systems perspective. And I recently read an article by Trish Greenhalgh in which she talked about this challenge that we face in complex systems design and intervention. And one of the things that she wrote that struck me was that we almost invariably need to adapt the interventions in some way to accommodate the system in which we're working. The way she put it was that the dance and the dancer are intertwined. And that recognition, I think, is an invitation for the way in which we do work going forward.
It reminds me of the Donella Meadows reading on Dancing with Systems, which is quite a wonderful piece of writing and reading and thinking, actually. And it takes me maybe to a question for you, Pierre, and for everyone, actually. We understand changes that are complex in systems that are complex, that all improvement is local. Ultimately, the local context matters a lot in terms of the intervention that you're trying to apply. And we're seeing that with work with St. Jude's Global, with the work that we've been doing with ELFT, with the work that we've done with you, Peter, and we continue to learn from you at Cincinnati Children's and elsewhere. But we wanted to kind of try to harvest a little bit from you what you see as best practice across the globe in the application of the science of improvement. What are some examples that people can refer to, look into, in order to continue to strengthen the way they approach improvement?
Before I answer your question directly, I wanted to just sort of reflect on what Peter is saying, because you used the word complex, Peter, like 10 times in a row. And I think it's the and that is true. The field of implementation science has sort of burst upon us while we're trying to do our work. Okay, and I've reflected a lot on really some of the very powerful tools that implementation science has brought in to our world to help us understand this complex environment. I think the other cautionary tale from that complexity is that you're not going to do this tomorrow. You're going to make some changes by tomorrow, but changing a complex system is going to take time, and it's going to take nuance, and it's going to take understanding and multiple sort of tries. But I think the good part of this for me is that the approach at a very basic level, microsystem level, is a simple approach. And it's the model for improvement. Okay. And I think that's our sort of, if we ever have anything that's close to a magic bullet, it's the model for improvement, which is to constantly remind ourselves that we need to keep the actual aim in mind, not the sort of the noise of the system, that we need to challenge ourselves to say, well, how will we know that we've made a difference? And then the humility to say we don't have the answers, and then, to reach out and say, well, what ideas do you have? And then to say, okay, well, we actually have a pretty good rubric for quickly seeing whether they work. So for me, it's the simplicity of the core method, which applied to the sort of spirit of inquiry around the complex systems that we work in, that is the essence of the science that can help us get through the complexity that you mentioned many times, which is true. So I just wanted to say that to give our viewers some reassurance that yes, it's very complex, but if you stick to the rules about the system of work, you can actually make sense of it. So, Pedro, to get back to your question, to me, there are sort of two broad types of work that we do. Well, I'm sure there are more, but in terms of getting results and having impact, we see our work as sort of focused, deep work, where we have a very clearly defined problem and we're going to go at it, and we know that if we get this right, we're going to have a really great impact. And then we have broad work, which is, how do we transform a system so that into the future that whole system can reliably and resiliently apply high quality systems to whatever problem they're trying to solve in their priority problem. So I would differentiate those two types of work, and I think we have really great examples, and you've been involved yourself, I think, in quite a few of both. So, if you look at the work you mentioned, the Mass Collaborative or the St. Jude's work in Latin America, where there is a very focused population of children with cancer who have a very high risk a problem, which is that they're susceptible to getting an infection, and a very well worked out response that if you recognize it fast and get that antibiotic into them, you will save a life. I mean, it's a pretty simple concept. And it's amazing that we have to have an improvement process to make that happen reliably. But I think that's where IHI really can help phenomenally, is to make those apparently straightforward processes that everyone should do very reliable. And I think the example of demonstrating a model of care, which is how the collaborative started off, how to do this very well in just a few sites, to deeply understand all the components of it, make it work beautifully, codify that, and then start to scale it, taking care to allow enough adaptation in the new environments that you're encountering, so that the people who are taking it on don't feel like you're just handing them some totally standard process. I think the work of transformation and complex systems is the long game, okay, and that's where we work with strategy and building capability and walking alongside and building the systems that can do that. And I wanted to take two very different examples just to illustrate. The one, from a high income country, I would say, if you look at the work of Yon Shipping, where they have a very thoughtful, deeply integrated process that extends not just within the healthcare system, but across into municipalities and schools and this much more into the social context, applying the same methodology and thinking. I mean, talk about complex systems. You've got multiple complex systems that are now sort of connecting up. And I know that that's the sort of philosophy behind the integrated care networks in the UK as well. And on the other sort of side of the economy scale is you've got a country like Ethiopia with relatively few resources physical resources, but huge resources in terms of vision and intention, who built a quality strategy that deeply included systems thinking, learning systems, and building the capacity to do this kind of work, to address the whole of their health system, starting off with maternal newborn health. So I think for me, I'm seeing some real live examples of very complex, very big systems, either at a national scale or at a regional scale, where these principles are being built into the whole system. And when we think about the whole system, to see it moving out of healthcare and into connecting with health, I think for me, gives me a lot of hope.
Thanks, Pierre. Peter, I'd love your thoughts on this question. When we think about improvement as working within a messy, complex system, one of the real joys of improvement is being able to connect with what matters to people, really intrinsically matters to people, and being creative and innovative and trying new things. And then we start talking about science, and many of us haven't had the greatest experience of science at school. There's rigor and discipline and method, and the two things almost seem to be at opposition with each other. So what do we really need to try to embed in terms of rigor for our improvement work to be scientifically informed, and how do we make rigorous science fun in this kind of work?
So first, again, we're talking about that the sources of complexity go beyond the individual interventions to the system, all the way to the interactions between the system and the intervention. So that's almost a daunting challenge. And as Pierre said, there's a great deal about the method that we use, in many ways very practical and iterative, because we do experiments one at a time. So when I think about rigor, I think about executing these steps that we go through. I mean, most scientists would call these experiments, we in improvement science, PDSAs, very rigorous application of all the process of planning the visual study, doing it, evaluating the results, and then deciding what to do next. That's rigor. And those principles really changed for as long as people have been doing science. The new availability of data is another place where we have an immense opportunity, and growing capability to do more sophisticated or more advanced mental design is a third that I'll just mention. There are more that we can talk about. So the opportunity now to advance beyond studying a single intervention to multi-factor designs, understanding the role of context, and then using analytic technique to learn in these more complex experiments provides an opportunity for us as we go forward, and an invitation to try and get our skills to the point where we can actually do those things.
That's great, Peter. I'd love your reflections, Pedro, on what you think about this. How do we help people who might not naturally see themselves as scientists or scientific adopt this curiosity and this way of thinking about making change that really we think will help the effectiveness of trying to improve the system?
Yeah, there's a kind of bread and butter principle here, which I think we undervalue and underestimate, which is the fact that we all are inherent improvers. We're inherent improvers. That's our life every single day. So there's something, Amar, in the balance of this beautiful rigor that is underpinned by our hunger to learn and do well, combined by our sense of purpose I feel everyone who comes into healthcare or is served by healthcare and by health is committed inherently to better, and kind of having those worlds of scientific rigor, inherent improvement, inherent purpose, kind of helping us drive forward in a way that encourages everyone to be able to be under that tent and kind of jump in and contribute. In the UK, which is where you and I live, there is an incredible opportunity. I would say a kind of once in a generation effort from the system, let's call it, which is the national health system, the NHS, in England particularly right now. So that they have put out NHS Impact, which is a kind of policy direction document, which invites everyone in the system to move towards trying to embed improvement as a way that they try to pursue best possible results. So how do you balance the rigor of the science, the beauty that improvement has to bring, with the opportunity to choose a kind of dance in order to deliver results here and now and build stronger systems for the future? What would be your advice if you were sitting across the table from one of the national leaders of the NHS and saying, this is brilliant that you've put this out now, as you're going to make it real and implement it in partnership with trusts and others in the system? These are our 3 recommendations. What would you say to them?
So the first one is the attraction, I think, that Pierre's talked about is that this is action-oriented learning. And the actions that we undertake need to result in something. So the first recommendation I would have is that we should create an expectation that we're going to produce results. That's where that keeps us focused, and it's also where the motivation for continued progress grows. The second, the hope is that as we do this, as we work change systems, we would start to see multiple problem-solving activities going on using a variety of different methods. But if we can hold ourselves to clarity around the purpose and outcomes of what we're trying to accomplish, and then also to the responsibility of producing results, that's the first step. The second thing is that I think there are opportunities now to use data in ways that stimulate greater alignment and greater self-organized action. So I think we're shifting away from looking at the way in which we use data as kind of we used to talk about key performance indicators, and there were these ideas that came out of Toyota and large industrial companies, to what we learned during the COVID pandemic, where it was much more important to have real-time data about what was going on around us, and it was that ability to see a variety of different features of the system, the number of cases, the reproductive coefficient, the location of cases, that awareness, that situational awareness, enabled leaders to start to make decisions in a much more real-time way. So a second recommendation would be to start to think about how we use data more effectively to raise awareness of problems, build will, maintain focus, and measure our impact in real time that stimulates action. So it becomes less as data as a dashboard and more as data as a process to support situational awareness, which supports action. So those are a couple of recommendations.
Thanks, Peter. Pierre, what would you add? Or
first is build a credible and practical model. So spend your first effort to build a credible and a practical model that demonstrably helps practitioners to do their work. Practitioners want to do their work. They signed up to do good. Let's help them do that. And we can build a model that can actually help them to do that. That's first. Secondly, don't underestimate the power of communication. Prepare the ground ahead. Let the whole country see the exciting work that's going on in the first place as they're building their model. Make it a pull, not a push. So as you build a model and it becomes obviously that it's a better system than they're currently using, let the country see it, disseminate as much as you can, and have people clamoring to have the thing that they're trying to offer. And then thirdly, I think very much getting to what Peter is saying is just provide practical, realistic resources to support the work that you're asking them to do. And I think I would put at the top of my list would be what Peter has just said, real-time data, that they don't have to go scurrying around and finding out how they're doing, but you're constantly telling them how they're doing, and giving them a real-time frame for making the decisions that they're making, and very importantly, giving them practical, tested tools that you've developed to help them do their work.
Yeah, thanks, Pierre. And Amar, I don't want to get you into trouble, obviously, but you're a voice in the system and a very credible one. And at ELFT, I know you're always trying to contribute to making the whole of the NHS better, not just ELFT. So anything that you'd add on that before you kind of take our next question?
Yeah, I mean, Peter and Pierre have given fantastic recommendations. I mean, based on what we've been trying to do for the last 10 or 12 years here in this trust, this part of the world, I think, we need to shift our mindset from thinking that the most senior people have the answers to some of these big system challenges. Actually, we need to recognize that the solutions are out there, and our biggest asset is the people out there. And we need to probably focus most of our effort right now on giving them the skills and tools, as Peter and Pierre have shown us so eloquently on this conversation, to be able to apply that scientific mindset to experiment, take their theory, experiment in the real world and learn from what happens. I think if we put those tools in people's hands, and our job really is to create the environment in which they can do that. And that's the job of system leadership. And we're going to have to do some really key signaling to the system that we're intent on doing things differently. We're going to have to find some places where we're able to experiment, because not everything is going to be amenable to experimenting at the same pace. And I think we're going to have to build a different kind of infrastructure for this. Data is one really important part of it, but equally people are going to need other kinds of support around them too. Co-producing improvement is not easy. It needs a whole support for people to really understand and to be able to learn how to co-produce improvement well. So those would be my initial thoughts. A lot of work, but a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, and of course, the people who are listening, we're using the NHS as an example, but wherever you're sitting in the world, it's likely that your system is thinking about how to do things better. So it's likely that some of these reflections will be incredibly helpful for you. Amar, I know we want to look into the future, so do you want to kind of start to walk us in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, probably what I'm going to do is, Peter, ask you to sort of, in the spirit of improvement, do some prediction for us, and we'll see whether that holds true. If you had to predict what the future of the field of improvement science has to hold, what would your crystal ball tell you? What do you think, 5 years from now, what do you think the field of improvement science is going to have in store for us?
So I think that, and this is a contingent prediction. The prediction is contingent on us succeeding, I think, in introducing the rigor that we've spoken about, which is to provide the field, I think, with practical tools to convince the field of the importance of the scientific part of our enterprise, so that the work that we do is consistently, follows standard work in terms of the design, standard work in terms of the evaluation, and a commitment to share our work through dissemination. I think if we manage to do that right, we will correct sort of some of the intrinsic weaknesses of our science now, which I think are, we tend to more to the religion part of improvement than to the science part of it. And I think we can address that balance by providing the field with some really great tools that are really practical. And that's, to me, is my prediction, is that as improvement science provides real practical help to practitioners to do what they really get up in the morning and really want to do, we will succeed in making the value of this science very, very clear. I showed Peter a couple of months ago a graph that shows the difference between the volume of publications for implementation science over the last 10 years versus the volume of scientific publications for improvement science. And my prediction is that if we do our work well, that relationship, which is heavily biased in favor of implementation science right now, will be reversed, and that the world will be clamoring for good, well-conducted studies of the science of improvement that will be leading the world to a better place for health and healthcare. That's my prediction.
That is a bold prediction, Pierre, but let me build on it a little bit. So scientifically, one of the words that's getting used in many fields right now is the word convergence. That the methods that we're using in many different fields, from engineering to more basic science to informatics, are actually starting to come together. And I think that introduces great opportunities for us. One of the most important opportunities, a second opportunity is, so there are new methods, new sources of data, new tools that are going to become available. And so the question is, let's imagine where we're going to be 5 years from now and even 10 years from now. A second is this, I want to know what you said, Amar, about this work being about unleashing the capabilities of people to actually change the things that matter to them. That Pierre also about that. So if there are new tools and that make it easier to get this work done, and ways of leading that are focused more on allowing people to make contributions, treating them less like machines and more like humans, then you can start to imagine the kinds of things that could be possible in 5 or 10 years. So new tools like large language models or artificial intelligence. Imagine if we could go to ChatGPT and ask for help designing the next PDSA cycle that we wanted, or perhaps even ask it to write the code to develop a run chart or a control chart, instead of having to go to a list or instead of having to learn it yourself. I think the field of artificial intelligence is going so fast that within 5 years, there are going to be significant changes in the way in which we get the basic work done. And if that persists and the tools become available as personal intelligent assistants to people who are trying to solve problems, there's the potential that the capacity of the community to solve problems will go up, and that we'll get better and better at solving these complex systems problems because we are able to keep up. I would say that in 5, we're going to be just starting to see that take place. In 10 years, I think it's more realistic that the kinds of changes that we've observed in other parts of society, the kind of networked ways of working, the accelerated way in which we've solved scientific problems, like in the Human Genome Project, those are going to become more available for us, those of us who are doing improvement. And 10 years from now, my prediction would be we're able to go by harnessing this variety of tools, and perhaps that might be the mechanism of action for driving Pierre's prediction that we're going to see an acceleration and an exponential increase in in the number of publications related to improvement science.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Pierre, Peter, it's been a marvelous exploration of the work that you've both led over so many years, and delving into the topic of science, thinking about quality improvement as a science, what that means and what that might mean for the future. Just a big thank you to you both for joining Pedro and I on this episode. Thank you very much, both of you.